So, welcome to another edition of the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me today, I have Heather Monthie. Heather, I got to read this out because I'm sure I'm going to miss something. Associate Dean of Technology at the Grand Canyon University. She's also a flight instructor, a commercial pilot with instrument trading. She's a drone pilot, podcast host, and has, get this, 4 websites. um, and techforregularpeople.com, which is your podcast, and you try to help everyday people understand tech better. So I'm going to pause there. So Heather, before we get into what the topics of discussion, so how do you manage to do so many things all at the same time?
I always say I got really good at time management, working on going to school and working full time at the same time. You have to learn how to compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
I've learned over the years you can do everything you want to do, but you can't do it all at once. Mm-hmm. So I have like a running list of things that I want to do. It's not going to happen right now. And so when I have a little bit of extra time, I'm like, all right, I'm going to crank out this project. So right now with the pandemic and I'm telecommuting, I'm saving about 10 hours a week by not commuting. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to build this website now and do this project. And I like doing projects. I like keeping busy, and it keeps me on top of all the different tech things that are happening and going on out there. And it's a lot of fun for me. So.
No, it's great perspective too, right? Because those extra 10 hours that you said could be spent watching news and feeling depressed and all that versus putting it
right.
So I think that's great. So let's get started with something that I know you've recently received a grant, and this is the focus on cybersecurity and teachers. Now that's I'd say a community that doesn't get a lot of attention when it comes to what does cybersecurity mean. So talk a little bit about, number one, the grant itself and how you're going to put it to use, but more importantly, what is it about this community that requires a deep understanding of not just tech, but cybersecurity?
Sure. So I'm very passionate about K-12 STEM education, specifically in the technology area. I kind of lump cybersecurity into technology. Mm-hmm. I started out in education. I started out as a kindergarten through 5th grade computer science teacher back in the early 2000s. And that was back when, and it still happens a lot now, where I was hired to teach computer science. I thought it was, I'm going to teach them coding and, networking and how to build computers. And it ended up turning into, you're going to teach them how to use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit of a disconnect. And I think that still happens a lot in K-12. And then I moved into higher ed, in 2008. But I've still had this, I still try to stay connected with the K-12 community. I'm very passionate about it simply because that's the future generation. That's the pathway. Mm-hmm. So if we can get kids excited about something early on, it can help fuel that desire to learn more about it. Think about something as a career. I sort of use myself as an example in that when I was in kindergarten, I took a field trip to the airport, and that sparked my interest in aviation. And I don't have anybody in my family who's a pilot. Nobody, my stepdad was, someone in the airplanes. But I just really got into airplanes, and my mom and my stepdad, they really helped sort of fuel that passion for me, even though they weren't interested in it. And so when you're thinking about K-12, you never know what kind of event, speaker, activity is going to just spark an interest in something. And I truly believe that can happen with cybersecurity as well. When you're talking to, say, like, an 8 or 9-year-old, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, I remember being that age, and we always had conversations about how to stay safe on the playground. Don't get fingers, say no to drugs, all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But now we live in this world where we've got to teach kids how to be safe both online and in person. And so I sort of liken it to law enforcement training, where you have to teach kids how to stay safe in public, and look both ways when you're crossing the street. Yep. But there's also going to be a group of kids that want to pursue law enforcement as a career.
Yeah.
So you have to look at cybersecurity in that same sense, that we have to teach kids how to stay safe online. They're using all these different apps, using TikTok and Snapchat and all this stuff. But how can you do it safely? But then there's also going to be this group of kids that they're going to be inspired to help protect people,
right?
Using their tech skills. And so we want to help both pathways there, and that happens in K-12.
So you mentioned something early on, which talked about, hey, as a computer science teacher, you wanted to kind of teach coding, but ended up, hey, teaching them how to use Microsoft Word. So um, right now, I mean, if you're a kid, doesn't matter whether it's elementary school, middle school, high school, there's a lot of unknowns that they are faced with. Right? Am I going to go to school? Am I going to see my kids, with my friends next year? What if I'm graduating? Am I going to get a job? So, given all of that, and given that they're a digitally savvy generation, or digital natives, if you if that's the term, um, is how do you help them understand that anything that they do, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Snapchat, anything else, in terms of privacy and security, how does that become part of their ecosystem, if you will, so that they still do what they have to do to kind of keep their mental and physical health, but at the same time do it with awareness of what they are actually giving up in exchange for what?
Yeah, that's always one of the probably the most frequently asked question. Like parents will ask me, like, how can I just make sure what my kid's doing on their phone? I can track that. You can install nanny apps. There's things that you can install on your phone
Yeah.
to monitor what your kids are doing. The problem is that they're so tech savvy, they figure out ways around it, or they'll go
Yeah.
get a burner phone or something like
Yeah.
that. And so what I always suggest to do and is learning from other people's mistakes. So
Yeah.
when you see something that happened, like you'll see a news article that's something that happened online, or you'll hear about some sort of privacy breach or something like that, take that as an opportunity to have a talk with your child, and you use that as sort of as an example, and learning from that example, but then also just opening up that line of communication, because the last thing you want is your child to be afraid to come to you because something happened. So you want to make sure that your child understands that, okay, somebody sent me this picture. It's now on my phone. I don't want my mom to see it. I don't want her to get mad. But this happened and I want to talk to her about it. So just making sure that that your child feels safe, that they can come to you with, if they have questions, if something happened. But then also having regular conversations about it, talk about it at the dinner table, and just have regular conversations about what kinds of things are you using, what new apps are you trying out, and then go, look on Google and figure out what those apps are.
Yeah, yeah. No, great perspective. So focusing a little bit on the teachers, right? In terms of they've obviously been thrust into this online thing literally overnight. So both on the tech side as well as the security side, how do you, I mean, what sorts of things are you connecting with the teachers to make sure that they, as the imparter of education, truly again understand what the do's and don'ts are, and how do they keep up with, again, new apps being rolled out, and whether it's Google Chromebooks being given out to kids, and how do they keep up with things?
Yeah. Yeah, in this day and age, you wouldn't think it's still an issue, but it is. And that the fact is, we still have a lot of students, a lot of families that don't have internet access, or even high speed. If they do have high internet, it might not even be high speed internet.
Yep.
And so a lot of schools are going remote, and there's a lot of plans already for fall that some schools are going to be teaching remotely, and they want to do Zoom and they want to do videos. But the reality is there's still some kids out there that don't have the technology to be able to do this at home. And I know that there's a lot of communities that are trying to come together and allow students to have access to the internet. So a lot of libraries, what they're doing is they're leaving their Wi-Fi on at all times, and you can go sit in the parking lot and use their Wi-Fi. And then I even talked to a teacher yesterday that was telling me about how in their community, what they're doing is they're taking school buses and parking them in these communities where they might not have internet access, and then the inside the school bus is a Wi-Fi hotspot, so people can come around the school bus and then use the internet there. I think that is still an issue that I don't think enough people talk about it. That digital divide is still there. Some of the other things are just some very like basic logistical things that you don't really think about. So like right now we're on Zoom, and our names are appearing on the screen. And so, students, teachers need to think about FERPA and protecting students' privacy. And so if you're going to record a video and then you're going to post it somewhere, now you've got students' pictures, students' names, all that kind of stuff that you need to be thinking about. So there's a lot of like little logistical things that I think a lot of school districts are trying to work through right now. And, I think that there's a lot of chatter online too. Like the school districts and stuff are coming together to try to work through some of these issues together and share ideas and how are you guys handling this, that kind of stuff. So it'll be an interesting fall semester for sure. But I think it's kind of one of those, everybody's in the same boat right now, and we're all just trying to get through it.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight into us here. Like you're saying, I mean, the digital divide and the ability to kind of provide high-speed internet access, things that sometimes you take for granted. So one last thing, I know this is something that you are very passionate about with your website, which is teaching the consumer the impact of technology and what they're bringing into their home. So talk a little bit about how that has evolved and what you've learned along the way.
Yes. So I started just my personal blog just to like be the place that I could help answer questions. It started, one of the big ones was when the Equifax hack happened and people are asking me like, what should I do? And so I wrote it all out and just sent it to everybody. And like, if you have questions, just let me know. And started the podcast as a result of that as well. And, the reason for that is just that, I'm the average person is much more tech savvy than we were 10 and 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We have all these devices in our homes now. We have Nests, we have Amazon Alexas, and we have all these things that are just listening to everything that we're doing and tracking everything that we're doing. But the average person doesn't necessarily know how to protect their information and how to protect their data. Or there's sort of this mindset of, well, I don't have anything that anybody can steal, so what does it matter? I don't have any money in my checking account, and not quite understanding the full picture of what's happening. So I just, I really think that, people who work in the tech industry, work in cybersecurity, our jobs are obviously to help, protect the enterprise and protect networks and that sort of thing. But I also think that people look to us, the average everyday person, moms, dads, look to us to help give advice and help direct them. We have even if you have like an aging parent, for example, who the elderly are being targeted very much right now, and they're getting phone calls saying you owe $500 in taxes, and if you don't pay it, we're going to come arrest you. And they're like, okay, here's my credit card number. And so that's where I think that we as cybersecurity experts, tech professionals, that's sort of our duty to help educate the general public on just how to be safe and how to protect your information. And then just, don't do it in a condescending way, do it in an approachable way. And, just sort of be that guide for somebody. Even if you don't know the answer to something, they'll come to you and say, hey, this happened. And I'm like, okay, well, I've never seen this before. Let me go see what I can find out. And just sort of be that guide for them.
No, I think I could not agree with you more. I think just in terms of, you start with Equifax and then you look at other breaches that have happened or the anti-TikTok movement in India. I mean, should I, shouldn't I? And there is no, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer, just awareness of saying, hey, what are you giving up in exchange for what?
Exactly.
I think. So again, one last thing, we won't get into that. We'll come back next time, but just for the viewers, is drone security.
Yes.
Right? I haven't heard that in a long time, but I think it's super important, especially right now with everything that's going to be quote unquote delivered through drones. Just understanding, hey, their movements, what data they collect, and what you're giving up in exchange for what. So we'll come back to that next time. So Heather, again, thanks for your time and good luck.
Yes, thank you very much.